Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. I will be sharing with you some thoughts about current developments in the Arab world from a psychosocial, historical, developmental perspective. I am not a political scientist, and my thoughts in that area will be amateurish. And in order to do that, I will speak about three different issues that are connected with each other. First, I briefly will share with you some thoughts on the dynamics of human social development, how societies evolve and develop. And then I share with you some thoughts about the Islamic civilization. And then we talk about the Arab movement and its impact in our world and relevance to our lives. Okay, from the perspective of social development, the conceptual framework that I share with you is this, that every human society goes through stages of development parallel, similar to development of individual human beings. When we speak of development, we are speaking of development of human consciousness. In other words, development takes place on the axis of consciousness. It is human consciousness that evolves and develops. And development of human consciousness then impacts the way that we use our knowledge, our experience, and create our societies and organizations. So, when we talk about human consciousness, we are talking about at least two important phenomena. One is that we as human beings, psychologically speaking, we are conscious that we are, that we exist, that we are not only existing, but also that we have certain capacities that make us human. Among these capacities, three of them are particularly important or unique to human beings. So these are the three powers of human psyche, human consciousness, human soul. These are all interchangeable words describing that phenomena of being human. And those three, one is that we as human beings have the capacity to know, our intellectual capacities, our cognitive capacities. And all the sciences and the arts that we see in this world and technologies that we see are the products of human capacity to know and to discover. And at the core of all knowledge, the most important knowledge, the most consequential knowledge, is knowledge of self. What do we know about ourselves as human beings. So that's one aspect, one power of human psyche. Another power of human psyche, and these are all equally important, another power of human psyche is the human capacity to love. Love is the supreme human quality, human emotional quality. And it is a condition that which determines all other human emotions. And therefore, when we are in a state of healthy love relationship with ourselves, with other people, with the nature, with the powers beyond us, when we are in that state, we feel calm, we feel certain, we feel happy, we feel joyful. When our relationship, love relationships, are in difficulty, we feel angry, we feel conflicted, we feel sad, and so forth. So in essence, the state of our love condition is the barometer of all our feelings and all our experiences that we have in the emotional realm. And the third capacity of the human soul is the capacity to choose, to decide. And these three capacities, to know, to love, and to choose, govern every aspect of our life. At any moment in life, we are engaged in these three processes. And of course, the best and the most desirable state is when our feeling, our knowledge, our love, and our will is in harmony with each other. Because in that condition, we feel a state of harmony, unity, inner peace, and interpersonal peace. Okay. Now, these powers of human reality are components of what we call our mindsets, our worldview. Every human being has a worldview, a view of reality, a view of human nature, a view of the purpose of life, and a view of laws of human relationships. We all have a worldview, and it is in the context of the worldviews that we organize our lives and our societies. So, very briefly, when we think about prevalent worldviews in human history and human societies, we will see that there have been three meta-categories of worldview. They are a survival-based, authoritarian, power-based worldview, in which people feel that the most important thing in this life is to survive. And in order to survive, you need power. And in order to have power, you have to oppress other people and control other people. And this kind of a worldview creates societies that are fundamentally authoritarian in organization and function. That's one category of worldview. This has been the most common worldview in human history, and still is extremely common in our societies. all over the world, we see the prevalence of this worldview. The second meta-category of worldview emerged several centuries ago and became very prominent with the advent of Enlightenment in Europe. And that era when humanity collectively was moving from one stage to the next stage. The meta-category of power-based authoritarian worldview is characteristic of a society in earlier stages of its development, similar to childhood of individuals. So you have a father figure, a powerful figure, who decides what is right and what is wrong, what you should do, what you should eat, everything is determined for you. And the authoritarian leader says, you be good, I reward you, and if you are bad, I kill you. It's a very simple structure. And it had worked for long, long time in human history. That's the reason that we have had authoritarian systems being able to stay in power. Few people in control of masses of people throughout history. But with the advent of Enlightenment and with a number of new scientific developments and philosophical human developments and ethical, moral, spiritual developments in 18th and 19th centuries, a new era in human history began. And that new era was particularly operative in the West, in Europe and later in Americas. And that created it was based on a new worldview. And it is a worldview that is characteristic of societies with a mindset similar to the adolescent age at the individual level. You know, at the individual level, adolescents are preoccupied with certain fundamental issues. They are preoccupied with their identity. They want to establish that they are the best, they are the most important, the most everything. Adolescents also have the quality and the capacity of being engaged in development of relationships based on competition, on power struggle, on winning and on losing. These are the characteristics of adolescent age. Adolescent age also is the age of eruption of ideas, of thoughts, of feelings, of creativity, of breaking the norms of society, of creating new areas of experimentation. So adolescent age is a very, very dynamic age, and it's a very exciting age. And at the core of it is the quest for identity and also excessive competition. And competition, of course, gives way to power struggle. And power struggle creates certain dynamics in the life of the individual and the society. So from a psychosocial historical perspective, we now collectively in the world of humanity, we are in either early different societies, either in the early stages of adolescence or latter stages of collective adolescence. there are still a number of authoritarian systems around the world. But basically, everybody is moving towards this mindset of adolescent age. And this has created a world characterized by enormous degree of competition, of rivalry, of power struggle in every area of human life. It is present in economics, it is present in political systems, it is present in the structure of human relationships, trades, you name it. Everywhere we are engaged in this process of collective adolescence. And we have created a world according to those. And this world has become very, very competitive, very adversarial, because there is a lot of power struggle taking place in the world. Another characteristic of adolescence is that in the age of adolescence, we reject the established norms of societies and want to create new norms, new standards of human relationships, of human behavior, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. And this we see also in the form of revolutions, in the form of violent revolutions or peaceful revolutions, in the form of the movement on the part of women for equality, on the part of different races for equality, on the part of competition between different religions. We see it in all areas of human life. So, as this process is going on, because human societies are living societies, living organisms, they constantly are evolving. Human consciousness is constantly evolving, going from one phase to the next phase to the next phase. And we are now, in some parts of the world, see still dictatorial, authoritarian countries, few. In other parts of the world, most parts of the world, we see the presence of this adolescent, this adversarial notion of survival of the fittest operating in the world, which we have created our societies and political systems and economic systems according to that. And also we see now glimpses of moving to the next stage, which is a stage, we call it a unity-based consciousness. A unity-based consciousness has certain characteristics, and among them, 4 of them are very fundamental. One is the consciousness of the oneness of humanity. Now that's a very important issue, because humanity has always been one. From the very beginning of life on this planet, and when human beings emerged on this planet, all human beings have been one. Okay, there haven't been several different kinds of humanity. There has been one human race. Now with the genome studies and so forth, we see it scientifically as well, okay? But we haven't been conscious of our oneness. So this is the age in which gradually we are becoming conscious of our oneness. Now this is extremely important, because human oneness is expressed in diversity. We are all one, but we are also unique human beings. We are unique cultures, we are unique societies. So it is this combination of unity and diversity that characterizes this new consciousness, that human beings are one race of humanity, unity, and this one race of humanity is expressed in diverse forms. Diversity, unity in diversity. The authoritarian system demands for conformity. Everybody should be the same. In the adversarial system, the focus is on individualism. The emphasis is on differences, on diversity. The next stage is when the balance is created between the realization of our oneness and recognition of diversity. And this is the characteristic of a new age, new consciousness that is emerging. So we live in a world, some societies in the oppressive authoritarian situation, many societies in beginning and middle and the latter parts of the collective adolescent consciousness, and few developments that are indication of going to the next phase. We are in that phase in humanity. So, based on that, let's think for a moment, discuss for a moment, the issue of Islam in this world and our understanding of Islam and relationship with Islam. As you know, Islam appearing after Christianity as a revealed religion. By revealed religion, in the Judo-Christianity Islamic tradition, means that they have a prophet or a person that initiates that religious community. They give it different names, but basically one that says, I have come to give you a message from God. That's basically what it is. And they have a book of which is, they say it is revealed to them. And in other words, they say these things that I tell you are not from me, but from a higher source, and I'm sharing it with you. And then they call upon people to create a new way of life based on their teachings. So Judaism, Christianity, Islam, these three that we are talking about right now, evolve and develop in this context and in that order. So Islam came after Christianity. And it came in the context of a very backward Arab society. And in certain ways, you can say that Islamic faith, its appearance corresponded with the early, very early stages of adolescent mindset and consciousness in humanity. So, Prophet Muhammad said that I have come to help to establish a community of Islam, okay, who will live according to certain principles and certain laws. And he called his community as Ummah, meaning community. And this community of Islam was to be operated according to the principles of brotherhood and unity. And actually also Islam meaning peace. That was the notion. So the message was a very marvelous message, you see. I have come to create a community of people that would transcend race and geographical positions and so forth, and they become all one in this community, okay? And the symbol of it was, of course, Hajj, when people go to pilgrimage to Mecca. Because at Hajj, everybody puts same clothes on. Therefore, the status of wealth and poverty and who you are and so forth disappears. All are the same. And they go and perform the same activities and same duties and so forth. So that was the notion of creating this kind of new community. Because before that, the Jews and the Christians were at odds with each other. And the Persians and the Romans and other civilizations were at odds with each other. And here was this new religion with this new idea of togetherness. That was a marvelous idea. And however, there was a major crisis, a crisis that never has been healed, a major rupture in this concept took place right after Prophet died. As soon as he died, the community divided in two. Because one group of believers believed that the Prophet has said that after he dies, his son-in-law, Ali, would be the leader of the Muslims. And the father-in-law of Muhammad, Abu Bakr, who was the elder of the society, of the group, he said, no, we have to decide according to the traditions of our tribe of how we would choose the next leader. And they chose him. And immediately the Shia and the Sunni groups were established. And the Shia and the Sunni still are at odds with each other. And the process that we see, for example, in Syria right now, is really a proxy struggle between Shia and Sunni. What we see in Iran, between Iran and the Arab world, is the struggle between Shia Islam and Sunni Islam. And the killings that we see taking place in Iraq during the months of Ramadan and different holy months and so forth. And we say 20 people or 100 people or 200 people were killed. They are Muslims, Sunnis inflicted on the Shias, and Shias were inflicted on the Sunnis. The same we see in Pakistan and so forth. So that struggle, that disunity that took place immediately after the Prophet died had continued ever since. And it had shaped to a very large degree the nature of the Islamic civilization. Nevertheless, in spite of this schism that took place, a very fundamental, very progressive civilization was established by Muslims. They soon after the passing of the Prophet, and even during the life of the Prophet, one of the characteristics of Islam was that it did not hesitate to use force to achieve its objectives. Okay? That's different from Christianity. Okay? And from a psychosocial perspective, it's not surprising because Islam was the beginning of adolescent humanity. And suddenly you see adolescent behavior on the part of the believers. of a religion, and the militarism begins. But nevertheless, the way that they handled Christians and Jews under their rule, and Zoroastrians, was that they considered them as the people of book, and therefore they considered them as being subject to less hardship than otherwise they would have been. So that was the nature of government and civilization that they did. I'm going to open. Now, Islamic civilization evolved. It became a very major civilization. It went from borders of China through India, all the Middle East, all the former, some of the former USSR regions and so forth, all the way to Spain. It was a magnificent civilization, huge civilization. But then certain crises began to take place, and of course one of them was that in 1492 was the fall of Granada in Spain, the war between Christians and Muslims. And that was the first defeat, major defeat of Muslims. And since then, Islam has been withdrawing and going less and less forward and more becoming isolated. And then, with the advent of modernity, something fundamental happened. You see, a religion, or a civilization usually has three components. And if we look at different civilizations of the world, we will see that they are basically connected to one of the major religions of the world. The Buddhist civilization, the Hindu civilization, Christian civilization, Islamic civilization, Jewish civilizations, or Persian, Zoroastrian civilizations. And by that matter, the Chinese civilization based on the moral, ethical teachings of Confucius and other moral philosophers of China, they all are based on certain moral, ethical, spiritual principles. And they create civilizations, and civilizations meaning they change the mindset, the worldview, the consciousness of people who begin to create a new way of life, a new society, new laws of relationship. And every civilization has three components. One component is the community of people that are like-minded people. That's one. The other part is a set of moral, ethical, spiritual practices that usually are both private and public. And these two then are connected with each other in the organization of institutions of society. The new types of societies that you create, and many times those societies revolve around the place of worship, around the church, around the mosque, and so forth. Okay? These are elements and components of a civilization that were particularly strong in Islam. Okay? The three parts were very much connected with each other and integrated with each other. That's the reason that you go to Islamic society, you will see immediately, as the sun comes down, the sound of the muazzin is there, calling people to go for worship in the morning. You are still dreaming. They wake you up and say you have to go and pray and so forth. It is all integrated. So religion, the practices of religion, and the community of people, they are all together. And there is no, nothing is secret, because everybody knows whether you have gone for prayer in the morning or not. You know, everybody knows what you are doing, you see. And that's the way that the society is kept together. Well, with the advent of modernism and new ideas and new concepts in the West, the Western societies decided that they would not follow the authoritarian rules that were imposed on them by the religious leaders of their religious leaders, Christians, and by the political leaders who were in collaboration with religious leaders to control people, right? So, in the West, an awakening of people happened. And people said, we are not going to follow these oppressive orders any longer. And in the process, they began to discard their attachment to the religion to a very large degree. And even those who remained religious, they modified the religion to meet their own ways of thinking and their own way of life and so forth. So a considerable change began to take place in the Western societies. And the number of people who would go to church decreased, and on and on and on. Everything began to change, as you know it. In Islam, this didn't happen. The control of authoritarian leaders, both religious leaders and political leaders, was much firmer. And one of the very negative things that happened was that the religious leaders, particularly, they began to discourage the masses of believers from learning the new sciences and arts and new technologies that were developing at that time in the West, in the lands of non-believers. And therefore they kept their people in a state of ignorance, while the West began to make major advances in the areas of arts and science and organization of society and new forms of government and so forth. The situation in the Islamic world remained in the same format that has been for a long time. When that happens in a society, the very fabric of the society is weakened, because society is a growing organism. And if you stop the growth of organism, then the members of the society, they become discontented, they become angry, they become frustrated, and gradually you create conditions that are ripe for upheavals. And these conditions became particularly acute in the Islamic world, because as the West was expanding and the modern ideas were emerging, they also developed very powerful armies. And these powerful armies went and took over the Arab lands. So they took over Egypt, they took over all of the Arabia, Finally, the First World War, the Ottoman Empire collapsed. So the whole damage after damage happened to the structure of Islamic civilization. Not only there was no movement and development, but also the established norms and processes that they had began to be discarded by the younger generations. And there appeared a tremendous gap between beliefs and actions. And when that happens, when there is a gap between what we believe in moral, ethical, spiritual terms and what we do, when that gap happens, then that civilization begins to crumble. And the outcome of that is usually uprising and violence. So we saw a similar process, interestingly enough, in former USSR. Because former USSR also started with certain ideologies, human-made ideologies, about brotherhood and about equality and about all of peace and all of those things, none of which the leaders of communism believed and practiced, and therefore the society gradually went into collapse itself. That's another story. But the point is that what we see in the Arab world now is we see the process of awakening of the oppressed masses, because you cannot keep a society in one state always. Development has to take place, and if development doesn't take place, chaos comes in. And the chaos usually would be accompanied by violence and different degrees of violence. And that's exactly what we see throughout the Arab world. We see violence, conflict at different degrees. Somewhat benign at the beginning of the recent developments, and now it's become very malignant in Syria, for example, and what is happening. All of these simultaneously of indication of several things. One is the indication that there is a need for change. Second, we see clearly that the leaders, those in power, have lost their willingness to adhere to the spiritual teachings of Islam. And therefore, they are doing exactly what's prohibited in Islam. Okay? The killings that are taking place is totally, when you want to study Quran, for example, sees that they are forbidden, they are not acceptable, but they are taking place. Okay? And there is a confusion of what we are going to do after we emerge out of this situation. And that confusion is a very fundamental, because nobody is asking the right question. I give you an example, a totally different example. About 20 years ago, I was in China. I used to travel to China quite often. And I have given a number of talks at different universities and so forth. And in one of my trips, I received an invitation from the Secretary of Propaganda or Information of the Communist Party for a dinner, for a Peking duck dinner. Peking duck is very nice.
Very good.
Huh?
Very good.
Yes.
Yes.
Even though I'm a vegetarian, I decided I will eat duck. I asked whether the duck was vegetarian. They said yes. I said, okay, I would eat it. So here we were in one of those private rooms in this very famous Peking duck restaurant in Beijing. And there were three of us, the minister, myself, and our translator, who was a very good friend of mine, a sociologist from Beijing, translated my books into Chinese and so forth. So we were there. And he turned to me and he said, you know, in China, we know that we cannot stay the way that we are. He said, further, we know that we cannot go back to Confucianism. Because there are certain teachings of Confucius that don't correspond with realities of modern life, such as the status of women, for example, in Confucius thinking, inferior. Third thing that we know is that we don't want to adopt the Western way of civilization, which is filled with conflict and competition and excessive adversarial relationships. So we are looking for a fourth way. Okay, that was very interesting, very insightful statement on the part of this gentleman. You know, he was an older man and he died a few years ago. But it gave me an idea of how Chinese leadership is trying to think, to find a way in which they can move from the authoritarian traditions that they have had throughout their history to modern era without going through that chaos that most societies have gone through. Europeans have gone through, Americans have gone through, all other places are going through, and they are hoping to go through that transition without that chaos. And I have been watching with enormous attention to see how they do it, because that's fascinating. A few months ago I was in China, and I am not so sure whether they can do it or not. They have become truly, in economic terms, truly, and social relationships, truly an adolescent society. Okay, truly. So whether they can now, this adolescent can be a good behavior adolescent or a chaotic adolescent remains to be seen, okay? But it's a very interesting process. Now, in the Arab world, we don't see that kind of soul-searching and questioning. At least I haven't come across it. To that the leaders of the Arab world asking themselves how we want to move from the condition that we are to a condition that is in harmony with the fundamental teachings of Islam, but at the same time in harmony with the age of science, with the age of new ideas and new developments that is taking place and taking over the whole world. It is the need for this movement, and they seem to be totally stuck in that process. So therefore they have chosen extreme ways, like Wahhabi movement, which is extremely militaristic in its orientation, and the whole notion of jihad, and the whole notion of going back to the time of the Prophet. But remember, the time of the Prophet lasted only during the life of the Prophet. And immediately after the Prophet died, disunity took place. And that disunity hasn't been healed yet. So how could you do that, you know? So this is the chaos that we see, at least I observe, in the situation of the Arab Spring. On the one hand, you have masses of younger, educated people connected to the world, who know about the ideals and the practices of the other parts of the world, and who want to bring that in harmony with their traditions and their beliefs. But there is no leadership to give the blueprint for that marriage of the two. And whether that marriage could take place or not, I am very doubtful. And in preparation for this brief talk here, I accessed a number of books by distinguished Arab Muslim scholars, and they all are very pessimistic whether that could take place. And in the context of this pessimism, we are in a state of confusion. We don't know what's going to happen, where we are going to go. But one thing is for sure, we cannot go back. And the other thing is for sure that violence and chaos, however awful, cannot last for a long time. There has to be stopped. And then out of that can emerge another dictatorial governance by extreme Islamic people, groups which then would take those people back again, or could be hopefully an enlightened attempt to create a new approach to bringing about harmony between the beliefs and the practices and the institutions that they create. And it remains to be seen what's going to happen. I definitely don't have any answer. I'm just anticipating it. Do you have any questions or comments you want to make?